name's Iwan Lehnert. I'm delighted to be joined by John Hofgartner, who is our Head of Learning and Teaching Licensing at Jisc, and Mark Andrews, who's Principal Strategic Development Manager for Adobe. John, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. How are we doing?
Very good.
Yeah, really good. Yeah. It's been a good bright morning, good opening session. Yeah, really looking forward to the next 2 days at Digifest.
Yeah, you were saying earlier on, Mark, that this is your 6th time at Digifest now, so you're a bit old hat at this now.
Yeah, do you know, I've been, one constant through my career has been Jisc and Digifest. I think I first came when I was a lecturer, then when I was leading a digital education team, and then now coming with Adobe. So it's kind of been, it's just great to see how this event's kind of evolved over time. It's been great.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So we'll start with you, Mark. Can you tell us a bit about your role and what you do for Adobe, please?
Yeah, sure. So I work as part of the Adobe education team. So I'm part of a kind of a small team that support our strategic customers. So I provide kind of education expertise, kind of community building, but I work really closely with our kind of customer success managers, our kind of marketing colleagues, our account teams, really to ensure that that our tools and technologies are really supporting strategic change at institutions and learning from that as well as we do that.
Fantastic. John, and your work as well, please?
Yeah, so I work in a Jisc licensing team, and like Mark, actually, Jisc has been a constant. I've been here as a member of the sector. Previously, before Jisc, I was in digital leadership in FE. That was my background, and now in licensing, heading up the learning and teaching portfolio for content and software. And what we do is we work on behalf of the sector. We work with the sector, engaging with our members, our strategic groups, really about bringing the right solutions to our membership about software, content, technologies for learning, teaching, assessment. So yeah, that's my role.
Brilliant. So Mark, I believe you'll be presenting here at Digifest over the course of the next couple of days. So what can you tell us about your session and what are you hoping people are going to get out of it?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. So we're hosting a panel session, which is really telling where we've got to. We've got a partnership with Jisc at the moment, the Transforming Together program, which is where we are working with universities that have taken an offer through Jisc to really support their embedding and utilisation of our tools and technologies to really cause strategic change at their institution within teaching and learning specifically. And so the goal really of the session is to have a discussion with some of the institutions that are part of that programme to kind of update people on where they've got to, some of the learnings that we're getting as we're going through that programme, and some of the progress that's been made as well as we think about how we look ahead and plan ahead with that work.
So that links kind of into the next question, which is more looking at what brought ahead this collaboration, what actually kickstarted everything, and you wanted to start working on transforming with programs. So can you tell us a bit more about where that all started?
Yeah, I can go now. I mean, in the title, we've got it leading and learning, transforming together. And I think when we look at those institutional cases, those I suppose strategies to implementing technology, we could see that link, that grounding in the digital transformation framework. We saw also the guidance around Beyond Blended, and this being a really, I suppose, broad technology that you could make progress with in these different areas. But how do you build this into a strategy in a kind of cohesive way that has that buy-in, that culture and leadership across an institution? Again, drawing into the transformation framework, drawing into the expertise of the Adobe team, and most importantly, the experiences of the members actually in there, in the lecture theatres, the classrooms, in the institutions implementing it. So that partnership, there is an equal partnership of let's do this together. Let's create this knowledge together, share it for the betterment of the sector, share that outward. So this is very much the driver behind what we're doing, and certainly getting the value and the impact out of that investment in technology. We know technology can be a significant investment. So particularly in the current climate, I'm sure everybody here wants to get maximum value and impact for the students out of this technology, and that was really the principles behind which we wanted to form this partnership activity.
Yeah, and it's really the product of probably 3 years worth of work, really, isn't it? Where, so 2 years ago at Digifest, we piloted a storytelling for leadership kind of program with the teaching and learning team at Jisc. And that was the trailblazer for this program, where we were working with institutional leaders, thinking about how could they do that, telling that internal strategy to colleagues within their institutions using digital means. So using it as a way of building digital fluency and literacy amongst the leaders, but also using it in a way that makes storytelling engaging to a diverse audience within the university. And so really, as we started to work with Jisc and with other sector bodies such as UCISA and people like that to think about, well, actually, how can we have a bigger impact across the sector? This program was kind of born out of a few workshops that we held with UCISA, with Jisc. So really think about, well, okay, when we use these tools and technologies, how can we really support them having impact across the institution, to support institutions with their diverse their strategies, and really all learn from that.
Yeah,
So,
and on that point of collaboration, the launch pad for the program, with the Adobe Express agreement option that we introduced, it was a perfect launch pad. The combination of that work we've decided with the sector, working with CIOs, technology leads and institutions to bring that about. What a great launch pad for that. It's a pioneering cohort. This is people that were taking this technology as part of their strategy for the next academic year. That was the launch pad to spring forward this group, actually, wasn't it? And I think we referred to them as the pioneers, and again, leading and learning, transforming together. In the title, that's really what we tried to get across with this.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement from the two of you and the passion you've got for it is coming across really well. I think specifically, Mark, focusing on Adobe's work, how do you support the digital transformation efforts? So sort of looking at employability at skills. What is it Adobe really brings to that?
Yeah, so as you may know, we've got what's called the Adobe Creator Campus program, which again was, I guess, something we've leveraged for part of this program, which is a piece of work that actually was born out of working with universities in the US, where universities actually came to us and said, look, we're using your tools and technologies, this was before Express, in different areas, in terms of for students to be able to develop digital fluency, digital literacy. And we'd love to work with you about how you can support that. And so that brought a kind of a community of practice, if you like, in the US, and that was the Creator Campus program. And then that's kind of grown now to over 100 universities worldwide, where we're working and partnering with institutions on a strategic level who have got particular goals around kind of equity and access, digital fluency particularly, future-proofing an institution. And so we really, with our customer success manager teams, with our networks, with our peers, really lean into discussing with institutions, what is it you're trying to achieve? How do we bring our technology to that? So it could be through training, obviously through kind of delivery of products and services and things like that as well. But really, it's tailored to what the university's missions are. And whilst what we're finding as we do these programs is that institutions will typically describe their situations in quite bespoke ways. But when you zoom out, there's a lot of kind of commonalities across the challenges. And I think as we've worked across all of these institutions, as we work with this cohort now, you start to work out what some of those common threads are. And a lot of them are around, internal communication and how can we support those kind of things. One's around kind of providing access and equity to tools, because we know in quite decentralized institutions as universities that it can be quite a challenge to take learnings from one area into another area. And by having things like Express, which can be placed at a strategic level across the entire institution, it means something that you learn from one side of the university can then be applied to another side of the university or a different part of the university. And so we're finding that kind of equity and scale piece is really helpful as well through the tools.
Brilliant.
I think on some of those examples, actually, I think what was really valuable at the start of the program was Adobe, through that work, was able to bring in other institutions from outside to have some inspiration, kind of almost the art of the possible. These institutions have been there and they have advanced that strategy and they've got to a point of realizing impact. And having that at the beginning of the year, and again, linking back to the theme of digital transformation framework, cultures, leadership, mindset at the start of the year, that's really important. So hear that it can be done, and here's some impactful ways you can achieve that. And that could be perspectives from outside the UK. How's it working stateside? How's it working in other areas? That's really useful insight to bring into the program.
And I think it's worth saying as well that a lot of this is about what it enables an institution to do. So one of our first creative campuses in the States, Clemson, they described it as the big tent. Partnering with Adobe enabled them to kind of bring in lots of other initiatives in a kind of a big bang way. And so it kind of created that kind of energy, that kind of enthusiasm. It was a kind of a way of kind of making strategies tangible to the delivery. And if I think about what we see in the UK with that, with places like Manchester Met with their Delta strategy, it's a way of kind of enabling that. If you think about Teesside with their future-facing learning strategy around collaboration, communication, and digital literacy, it becomes a tangible way of actually delivering that strategy and upskilling faculty and staff at the same time. So there's a few examples. If I go to Japan, Ritsukumen University have got a big university strategy around entrepreneurship and kind of make it. And so they have lots of maker spaces. They have very experiential pedagogy. And essentially our tools then underpin a lot of that and their work with local businesses as well as a kind of like a point of interface. And so we see universities use it in different ways depending on what their strategy is, and that's something I really love about my job, is actually working with institutions to see how we bring our capabilities working with Jisc on the capabilities that Jisc bring, and then the university, what they bring and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it's great that it's so flexible that it can accommodate that as well. And speaking of accommodation, John, I'll start with you on this one. What was the thinking behind developing the Leading and Learning program to accompany the agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to some of these points we've been talking about. Is it doesn't end at the technology investment. The agreement with the Adobe Jisc agreement for Adobe is there, absolutely. But it doesn't stop with the investment to get that impact, to realize the outcomes for students, the outcomes for staff. It takes more than that. It takes that institutional leadership, that institutional buy-in. Again, linking back to some of those themes that we started off with the program around, we wanted to be really strong on culture, mindset. Who are the change agents within the organization? A term we've used a few times is, what's the secret sauce to try and make this work, to get that scope across an institution? Because you might find pockets of engagement for a period of time. Maybe that's anchored on a particular person that's been really driving that. How do you get over that bit into full adoption, full integration, and ultimately translate that into impact and value? And then you really see the value of that investment in the technology come through. So from a licensing perspective, it's all about all those capabilities, the Adobe capabilities, the Jisc capabilities, helping our members who are accessing licensing arrangements like Adobe Express through Jisc to make value out of that, realize the impact. So that was the driver for us.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying as well that so much of this leans into something that's really unique about the sector. And I even think maybe it's unique about the UK sector. I don't know. Other people can challenge me on this, but it's just how collaborative the sector is. And I think Jisc has done a great deal to kind of be that network effect, to be that partner in the middle that's helping that network, that fusing of learnings across institutions, across the sector. And I think so much of this is collaboration. Like we were chatting about this before, like I don't think there's any partner that's kind of dominant here. It's kind of really working together as we really align on that vision of how can we really support transformation, how can we collectively work out with the sector what that secret sauce is that can really support the sector in kind of transforming in the way maybe it delivers teaching and learning in access and equity and things like that as we move into this kind of digital first, AI first world.
Yeah, and I think that's where we lent in quite quickly, wasn't it, to the convening of the community bit. Really amplifying the community messaging behind it. This being quite a tight user group community, so giving it that focus as there's a specific technology and we're going to lead and learn together to realize transformation. And that's been a real drive. And we'll talk more a bit about the workshops themselves, but you could see that coming through in the discussions, that appetite to want to talk, share, discuss bits that are more challenging, bits that are working well. And I think, in terms of the panel later, you'll see that profile of institutions, different size, different types of roles, each with this almost common goal to realize this impact. So without any spoilers, that's I think some of the message I'm looking forward to hearing about in that session.
Brilliant. So sticking with HEI, how have they benefited from using Adobe Express, and what sort of barriers have they faced over the course of their utilization of it?
So I think one of the big things that it kind of solves is that it's really easy to deploy. So something like Adobe Express, which is cloud-based, app-based, it runs on any kind of device, any kind of laptop, any Chromebook, kind of iPhones, Android phones, really means that everything that you do, can scale across your institution. And so I think that's one of the big barriers that I think it's started to overcome. And it really is equipping students and faculty with access to, different modalities, different digital communication tools, if you like, different ways of telling their story, different ways of completing coursework. And it also provides access to safe generative AI as well, that students and faculty can be, just rolling out across the entire institution to be able to, create images, as you can do if you make your bar of chocolate later on at the stand. You can play with that and actually give that to all your students and your staff to make use of that within learning activities. So I think there's that piece. And then with that comes the affordances of scale. That means your professional development, you're not training on lots of different tools. So it means, Jonathan learns on one tool, he can then go and show, his peers, how to do that on the same tool. It's also been designed to be easy to use. So it's really made for everybody. But then with that, it also scales up. So you can be, learning some of the basics, if you like, on Express, and then move up to Creative Cloud if, you need to go into Photoshop, because Express is powered by those tools and technologies that we have within those kind of, if you like, those flagship applications. And so it's really bringing a lot of power to students and to faculty, and to the whole university, whether it be the marketing teams as well and things like that.
On the record, can I just confirm a very important question? What chocolate are we talking about?
So if you go to the stand, good question. So if you go to stand over there, you can create yourself a customized chocolate wrapper work using Adobe Express, essentially. And then I think it's Tony's chocolate.
The good stuff then as well.
Nice chocolate. Yeah.
Excellent.
There's some challenges in there. So there's some prompts to think about creativity in different disciplines. So how might creativity apply to maybe medical areas or in engineering? How do we think about these creative tools in those contexts? And it's a bit of fun, and it is fun over there. Do check it out. There is a message under there of actually what does creativity look like in these other discipline areas. We know these are important skills. It's certainly when it comes to employability, thinking about what makes the future student employable. Don't want to deviate from the task, but I think it's important to say that there's authenticity to it.
But I think there's a really useful point there that, quite often we think about, the idea of these sort of technologies being for, those kind of creative students. But every student needs to, and faculty member, we communicate in digital ways, we communicate digital means. And so what better place than university to enable students to think about, well, how would I describe this as a podcast? How might we work together like we are now as a podcast? How might we edit that nice and easily using the podcast tool? How might we, collaboratively create presentations or videos? So it's really leaning into a lot of those mediums that we know students and ourselves are using outside of the classroom, and then kind of legitimizing them at scale within the classroom as well. So we might know how to make vlogs for our social media, but what does it look like when I'm maybe a medical student who's maybe needing to create some patient information, collateral on a particular issue, or maybe an economics student that we listen to loads of podcasts. So wouldn't it be great if an economics student were able to create podcasts that actually explored a particular topic? So that's what I think these tools start to enable, is that faculty can be really delivering kind of assessments that are authentic to the disciplines that students are going into and the world that they're going into.
There's a point there that you mentioned around the use of AI, and again, there's some opportunity to try that. But I think when we look at some of the guidance that Jisc has put out from the AI team around assessment and integrating integrating AI into assessment and practice, is actually looking at these tools, whether it's AI image generation, as how would that be part of your assessment strategy for a student? How would you incorporate that particular use of that technology and how they respond to an assessed piece of work, or perhaps help them articulate their understanding of a topic as well. So I think, again, thinking back to that advice, the guidance, the strategies, the transformation frameworks, thinking, okay, well, these tools, how are they going to be part of a bigger strategy, whether it's our assessment transformation strategy or it's our digital teaching transformation strategy, what that looks like. So again, thinking about how that looks longer term as part of a cohesive strategy with your curriculum development, I think is an important consideration with any of these technologies as well.
Yeah. Sticking with you, John, from the Jisc side of things, how does this agreement actually support equity of access?
So again, I think we've touched on some of the themes, but certainly from a licensing perspective, we work on behalf of the sector. We engage with strategic groups. We're about making these technologies affordable for the sector with favourable standards. So we work directly with our membership through, and again, you can find out on the Jisc website about the strategic groups around licensing. So we're engaged with them around standards, be that through accessibility standards or sustainability. These are things that we certainly look at when we're working around these technologies, and ultimately making them available to the membership. And with this particular example and this partnership we're talking about today is how can we combine that with the broader capabilities of Jisc, the advice, the transformation, AI guidance, how can all that feed into this particular technology to help institutions maximize the impact of that?
Yeah. What I like about this partnership, which you mentioned, like the AI team at Jisc and things that we're looking at working with as well, is that we're really being problem based. So we're really looking at, okay, well, what are the needs of the sector, and how do we then bring, like you're looking at how from a Jisc perspective we bring the different, whether it's the teaching and learning team at Jisc, whether it's the licensing team, how do they all come in to kind of support what the institutions are trying to do, and similarly from an Adobe perspective, what kind of skills, what kind of abilities and things do we bring in to support that, and that's where we're looking across our teams as well to do that.
And certainly when you've got decision makers and budget holders possibly attending today, is having that fairness and transparency and understanding of what the costs are going to look like over a period of time. It's important for planning into your strategy. We talked about the technology investment is one piece, you need to be able to realistically plan for a longer time horizon than 1 year to see large technology, significant technologies reach that point of impact and integration where you're realizing all of that value as well. So that other bit of work, that critical bit of work that Jisc licensing does is very much around that fairness, transparency and equity in what we do for the sector with software and content vendors.
So staying with you, John, for a minute, focusing on the employability toolkit. Obviously, employability, incredibly important for universities. That's why they're there. How does this agreement actually support universities to use that employability toolkit? It's something they're getting a lot out of, but how does the agreement help maximize that? Yeah,
so I'm starting with what makes a student employable. And we talked about some of those examples of the creativity chocolate bar. But there's a serious message underlying that, which is when it comes to the base digital proficiency of a student, an employable student, is that needs to be what are the technology used in the workplace to articulate their ideas, their communicate visually, perhaps more creatively, or influence. So those professional skills as well. So you've got the digital proficiency, you've got the professional skills that wrap around that, I suppose, that qualification, those key technical skills. So there's that, what is an employable student of the future, and thinking about how they might engage with technology, how they might share ideas, how they might capture their journey of learning as well. So some of these tools allow a student to build that story. You said it started with storytelling, of course. Students telling their story from when they entered maybe their institution right through to their employment experience, whether they're participating in experiential learning, they can capture that whole experience. Mm-hmm. So there's that way of a student, through the employability toolkit, being able to understand what makes me employable, how can I articulate that, and we think the technology, the agreement enables that to happen as well. And I think the other theme there, which we've touched on as well, is the assessment side. We've talked about assessment for learning and the role that this type of technology can play in those types of strategies, allowing students to feed back and feed forward on assessed pieces of work. It's I could share my creative artifact with you about this brilliant idea I've got, and you could say, well, there's some improvements here, improvements there. You can do that via obviously a very accessible platform that's web-based. So that's, to me, it brings to life the toolkit with an example. Here's the technology, it's an example of how you might enhance employability of a student, how you might adapt your assessment strategy. So they're good examples for the toolkit to bring it to life. So that was the thinking and the aim for that.
Well, it seems like it's worked so far. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Mark, could I ask what have been the biggest challenges for HEI along the way?
Oh, big challenges. So I think one of the biggest, universities are big, big and decentralized. Anyone who's worked in the sector for, we've worked in the sector for 20 years now. And so that you don't have one culture. There's many different cultures across an institution. And so I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, is actually clearly communicating internally how we're going to deliver strategies, how we're going to set ourselves up and shape ourselves for strategy. So we think about, I think one of the first sessions that we ran was actually having our participants look at their university strategy, look at what we were doing for the partnership and map to their strategy, and also to connect with those senior leaders who've opted into the partnership to really double down on what is the strategy, what is the objective that we're trying to drive. And then becomes the messiness of actually, okay, how do we do that? And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, is actually then internally, you could call it kind of like an entrepreneurship role, connecting internal departments together to kind of come up with a service or a support or an offer that sets you up and shapes you up for success. And I think the experience that collectively we can bring to that is the experience that we've had working with other universities kind of globally, but also within the UK, and through these toolkits to kind of really support that getting that clarity of objective to then go and tackle that. So I think that's, to me, that's probably the biggest challenge. I mean, these other kind of more practical challenges are when you're doing assessment transformation. Often that can run in the face slightly of kind of rules and regs. So again, it's you might start with a particular objective, and then as you start to unpack it, you start to unweave actually some of the challenges along the way. So again, I think as we go through these programs, we then start to look at, well, how do we solve some of these issues? So how do you offer those student choice on assessment? How do you do that in a way that's got the right rigor around assessment? That's the kind of work that, as we're working with the sector, we're starting to solve some of those things that hopefully then map to other institutions as they go through. But I think that's the area where that's where the secret sauce piece comes in. as we try to solve some of these, at scale. Some of these
I think on that subject as well, focusing on the success of the actual program, I'm going to ask you both to name just one highlight from the program itself. So John, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Joe, it's the in-person events, and I know this is, what we've deliberately done is we've made the workshops in person at different locations over the year, and I know that can be quite challenging in the current climate in terms of budgets, but actually going into that workshop and just having that focus, we allow institutions to have free spaces on that as well, so that you can bring a small team. And you see the discussions on the table, it's rich. And then you see it kind of spreading around the room. And then you've got some brilliant facilitation by our advice team at Jisc. And then you've got the Adobe experts talking about the tools and what, examples from outside, as we've touched on. So kind of throw that in the mix as well. And you just feel this, it's just great. It's just this sort of energy in the room and just want to create something, want to advance the strategy. And I think this is an important part, because when you're making, again, when you go back to that decision maker on perhaps who's going to make a technology investment, is it doesn't just stop at the purchase, is thinking about what is that resource implication as well? How might I accommodate my team or the right roles or the change agents to participate in these types of activities, so that they can ultimately help the institution realize that return on investment? And that's difficult in the current climate, but it's really important. And and for me, that's absolutely the highlight. I had a great time in Bristol a few weeks ago. So yeah, for me, that's it. Mark?
So I can't have the same thing, but the energy of the sessions are great. For me, so we follow up with the participants individually. They have a direct relationship with Adobe and with the customer success team as well. And for me, it's those calls that we have with them where they're now delivering the projects that they've been discussing on the day. So whether it be like Leeds Trinity doing their online training for faculty and for students to earn digital badges, as they start to tell stories digitally, or whether it's the workshops that Manchester Met are running, or the placement modules that Cardiff Met are running at the moment, and things where students are using it. So to me, it's the outputs of those workshops as they're going into practice and actually really hearing about the experiences. That's been really, it's really rewarding, knowing that there's more substance behind just chatting about these things, but it's actually then doing it.
Yeah, it's really gratifying to see that it's coming off, and to get those specific examples is fantastic as well. So just to start wrapping things up, how can universities and institutions get involved in the Leading and Learning Together program?
Yeah, so on the Jisc website, if there's go to the licensing web pages, there's chest.ac.uk. In there, that's where we have the details on Adobe Jisc license agreement, and that includes the Adobe Express option. We open up the orders on that on May 1st. So institutions that are looking to go forward with, say, the Adobe Express or the agreement offering, is they will be invited to participate once they've made that decision to take them on into that next cohort. And we've deliberately positioned it as like a cohort. So they'll start the academic year. They'll hopefully learn from the previous year who will attend. So they'll go forward as that next cohort. So that's how they can step into it. I'm also here today, so you can catch the licensing team as well to talk about that. That's how they can get on board.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, John and Mark, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great session. Can we just get a bit of information if we want to get in touch with you after the event or going forward over the next several months?
Yeah, absolutely. You can contact your relationship manager if you're a Jisc member. There's also their help at Jisc email address. There's here, if you're at the event, there is a licensing space just over there in the central hub area. There's the Jisc and Adobe stand in that space. So if you're here in person, please do speak to us.
Yeah.
We'd love that.
For all things Adobe, we've got some Adobe colleagues here as well. So please, go and ask them anything about any of the work that we're doing or any of the tools, technologies, and partnership options. You can also speak to the Adobe guys as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, a quick note about our upcoming event, Connect More 2025. That's our free online event from the 14th to the 16th of May. Education Enhanced, navigating today's challenges with practical solutions. Find out more at jisc.ac.uk/connect-more. See you there.